Hi everyone, my name is Ava and I'm an American living in the Netherlands, and today I'm going to tell you the honest truth about what it is like living here as an American.
So buckle up because I'm gonna be spilling all the tea. Actually, this is for my wife. I'm more of a coffee person. All right, but before we go into my brutally honest thoughts about living in the Netherlands as an American, I wanted to take a moment to thank the sponsor of today's video, italki. Now, some of you may know that I've worked with them before. I've used italki on and off myself, so I'm really excited to take some time to tell you about them today because I really think it's a great place to learn a new language. And honestly, as an American living in the Netherlands, I can very confidently say that my professional and personal life has improved greatly since my Dutch has improved. So to start, here's how italki works. On the platform, you have access to many language teachers at an affordable rate. And you have several filters to choose from, so you can really choose what you're looking for. So one filter that I like to use is the professional versus community teacher filter. So there's some difference between the two. Learning with a community teacher is a bit more informal compared to professional teachers. Professional teachers have a lot of experience teaching students. Community teachers are more like a tutor. That's how I see them. So basically, in my experience, I find that if you want to be successful at learning a new language, you should be practicing it pretty regularly. Now, my Dutch at this point is pretty good, but that's because everyone around me is Dutch and I've had plenty of opportunities to practice it. So on italki, the professional teachers option was the one that I went for, but italki is really flexible in that way. So you can really choose what options work for you and you can really customize it to fit your needs. And I'm using Dutch here as an example, but you can learn any language on italki basically. They have a ton of language options. So you can go onto their website and just pick a language that you're looking for. The other great thing is that here on their site, as you can see, you can schedule a class pretty quickly. And that is such an important feature because it reduces the barrier to taking a class. So now these classes on italki are also one-on-one, and usually private language lessons are quite expensive, but as you can see here, the rates on italki are not bad, and each teacher sets their own rate. Now, the first 3 lessons are trial lessons, so they actually have a reduced rate. So you can try out italki and see if it's a good fit for you for a reduced price. So I've included a link in the description box down below for you to check it out. As I mentioned, the trial lessons are really quite cheap, just saying it like it is. So you can really try it for pretty low stakes. With that said, now let's get back to the video. Okay, so in this video, I wanted to cover 3 themes. So first will be the stuff I had to get used to when I moved to the Netherlands. Part 2, or sort of another theme in the video, will be stuff that I love about living here, which honestly is the majority of the things, as you might have guessed from the rest of my videos, but also just I continue to live here, and there is a reason for that. And the third thing I wanted to talk about is sort of the stuff that I'm still working on, getting used to, because I would be lying if I said that they aren't a couple of things that I'm still getting used to and I still have to sort of make peace with, because no place is perfect, even though the Netherlands comes pretty close, for me at least. Okay, so starting with stuff I had to get used to. I mean, when I first moved to the Netherlands in the beginning, I have to say that I kind of expected things to be, pretty smooth. Like, I didn't expect too many hurdles or problems. Part of that was because I had been to Europe several times, so the difference between somewhere else in Europe and the Netherlands versus the US and the Netherlands is a little bit smaller. Plus, I had also visited the Netherlands several times. Like, I had spent a lot of summers here with my girlfriend, then girlfriend, now wife. And in those summers, or we would come over for Christmas, like, I really got to know the country. And which is why when I moved here, that was an active choice. I wasn't entering blind or anything. Well, so spoiler alert, I was not fine. I ran into so many little hurdles and troubles when I moved here. Like, things didn't go as smoothly as planned. My wife was also very confused when things wouldn't work out for me because I'm a clumsy person or because, bureaucratic reasons. Now, one of the things that I found personally challenging was that I was trying to learn and practice Dutch. So I would go, and at the time we were living in Amsterdam, and this is more prominent in Amsterdam, I would go to like cafes or restaurants and try to speak Dutch to the people working there who were Dutch. I know sometimes they're not, but they were Dutch in many instances. And then I would make one mistake and then they would just switch to English like that. Or sometimes I would hesitate just 1 second too long and then they would go, aha, not Dutch. And they would immediately start speaking in English. And I think constantly feeling like I didn't belong was a challenge. So that was in the beginning. I do not have this anymore. My Dutch at this point is pretty okay, so I can do most things in Dutch. I say most things because there's still some times where I don't understand something perfectly, and that kind of changes the meaning of everything. But my Dutch is pretty good. But in the beginning, it was not, because obviously I had just moved to the Netherlands, and very many internationals like me, when they first move here, they will also experience this challenge, which is that a lot of the bureaucratic things are in Dutch and only in Dutch. Like taxes, those love letters from the Belastingdienst. Oh my God, they are just in Dutch. And in the beginning, I had no idea what they were saying. I had to ask my wife like each time, like, okay, do I owe them money? Are they giving me money? Like they never give you any money. So, but it's like, I never knew what was going on or which different taxes I had to pay, because that's another thing. Like there's so many different cultural differences. Like I didn't know of all the taxes that existed. Like trash tax. I call it the trash tax. It's probably called something more elevated than that, but you know, or like your income tax. Anyway, all of this stuff is in Dutch. And in the beginning, that is a hurdle that internationals will have to go through if you don't speak Dutch. And if you are lucky enough to have a Dutchie to rely on, then that helps a little bit. But it's also not a good feeling because you want to be able to do everything on your own. But alas, not everything works that way. Okay, but going back to the language part a little bit, I want to say that if you are an international moving to the Netherlands, like of course Dutch people expect you to speak Dutch. Even though you might think that everyone in the Netherlands speaks English, and they do, their English is very good, it's still really useful if you speak Dutch. I've repeated this very many times because I feel like it's really a point that I want to get across. But that said, I feel like even though Dutch is not the most difficult language for a native English speaker to learn or someone who even knows English, it's still not super easy. And especially people visiting, I've noticed this with like friends who visit and then they try to pronounce Dutch names of places. So for instance, you'll go to Amsterdam and there's a station, Amsterdam Zuid or Amsterdam Zuid, and then people, you know, even the machine, even the automated machine that pronounces the name of the station, you should pay attention if you're ever in Amsterdam Zuid to hear this, because the machine itself goes Amsterdam Zoid, and it is not Zoid. And even if an English speaker was trying to say it, I think they would say something like Zoid, but I guess that's Zoid. Again, it's very different from Dutch, where you say Amsterdam Zuid. And Zuid sounds very much like south, right? Except it's written differently. And if you don't know any Dutch, you can't just like derive the pronunciation from the letters because you don't know what they're supposed to sound like. And another example of this, like this happened on the train and literally Dutch people around us started cracking up because that's how funny this was. So there's a city in the south of the Netherlands and it's called Nijmegen, but a friend, he just went Nijmegen, and I started cracking up because it's like, I think I only knew the name of the place based on pronunciation, and then I saw it in writing and it made sense. Like I learned Dutch pretty quickly, like at least some Dutch even before I moved to the Netherlands. But I heard that and I thought it was so funny because it hadn't even occurred to me that of course that's how you pronounce it in English, or one of the many pronunciations. So Nijmegen. Okay, so that was more of the logistical bureaucratic stuff, or you know, like the more practical things, speaking Dutch, okay, making sure you have your Dutch bank account, all that stuff. But honestly, like there's also this cultural thing that I feel like is very difficult to overcome in the beginning, if you especially are not surrounded by Dutch people all the time. So I was lucky enough for that to happen. So for me, it was sort of like a crash course where I experienced a lot of hurdles, misunderstandings, like maybe, you know, hurdles and overcoming them sounds really intense, but they're just tiny little hurdles, more like little bleeps that, you know, you notice that everyone around you is sort of like in on the joke, or they're speaking a secret code and you are left out. That's kind of the feeling that I experienced my first year and a half here. And I feel like that went away, but in the moment, I didn't think it would ever go away. I always felt like I would be an outsider. And this is, again, as someone who has a Dutch partner, if this was hard for me, I can imagine that it's harder if you don't have that. So to give some examples of these things, like I feel like there are a lot of unwritten rules. So here in the Netherlands, people like to be very gezellig. So they like to like go with the flow, make sure everything is cozy, no friction, because that is ongezellig. So for instance, I would go over to my in-laws' place and then they would ask me if I wanted like tea or water or whatever. And then I would just respond, no, I'm good, thanks. And then everyone would be sitting around me having their tea or something to drink, maybe a coffee. And then I would just sit there with nothing. And that was not an issue, not a problem to me. And I think they also thought it was not an issue or a problem, but there was something off about the thing. They were a bit surprised. And I think it's sort of, if you say yes in those situations, even if you don't want the tea, right? Like if you just say, thank you for the tea, yes, I will have some, and sit with the cup, you're sort of like joining everyone in it. And that's the unwritten rule here in the Netherlands, that it's typically polite to just say yes and sit with everyone with this drink, even if you don't want it. And I had no idea. So I sat there, you know, with nothing. And then I noticed that it was off. And then my wife just said, you know, the next time you can say yes. And I thought, wow, Now, isn't that a great idea? So that was a little bit of a faux pas that I made, and there are tons and tons of these. Like, I could go on and on. That's why I made this channel, right? Okay, now this other cultural thing that I had to get used to, and maybe this is specific to Americans, and that is the portion sizes, and especially when it came to my coffee. Now, I understand that there are no refills here. That is totally fine. But I mean, I really had to get used to getting this tiny little thing when I would ask for a coffee. And this was when, even during COVID, you know, you would get coffee to go, or you sit at a cafe and you just get this like tiny little thing. And to be honest, I'm mostly used to it now, but I still sometimes sit there and I go, this is disappointing. I was expecting something a little bigger because that's not gonna cut it for me. And other times I've noticed that it's really interesting because when I was back in the US, you know, I would get these like huge coffees, you know, just drip coffee, and it's great. But I do notice that it's weaker. And that's also an interesting change where I've come to expect a certain flavor and kick from my coffees now. And I miss that in the US as well. So right now I feel like I'm in a very specific zone when it comes to my coffees, where I would like a lot of it, but I also want it to be strong. So, you know, I'm trying to work that out. All right, now I want to move on to the stuff I like and the stuff that I have gotten used to and I like. And, you know, the stuff that I mentioned, I don't necessarily dislike it, obviously, but, you know, it did take some adjustment. Now, this one thing that took adjustment for me is sort of, it speaks to the point of how there's a secret code in this country, right? And you really have to be in on the secret to understand it. So when I take the train to work, because I commute to work via train quite often, and I discovered that there is a sequence to how people sit on the trains. Now, here in Dutch trains, you'll often have these four-seaters where you have two seats facing each other, like two seats each, row of two seats, okay? Now, the way you sit on these seats, there is a whole system to them, and you cannot disrupt the system, okay? So first, the person who sits there gets a window seat, okay? It doesn't matter which one they choose, like going whatever direction. They choose one of the window seats. The next person who comes is not allowed, this is unwritten rule, they're not allowed to get the window seat immediately across from the person on one of the window seats. They have to sit diagonally across from that person, so not at the window seat. And then the third person that comes may get the window seat, and then the fourth person gets that remaining seat on the outside. That is a whole system that I had to learn via observation. Like, Dutch people, comes naturally to them. They don't even think about it. Well, now I do this very naturally too, but sometimes I sit there and I go, this is really weird. Like, when I'm that second person who's not getting the window seat, I sit there and go, I know Dutch people are tall and they have like long legs, and that's why this works, but I would really like to be sitting near the window right now. But no, I have to follow this system and sit diagonally from that person and not get the window and then watch a third person come by because rush hour, it's gonna get full. Sit on that window seat. And I'm there like, yes, those are the rules. Gotta follow them. All right, so now I've shared a little bit about, you know, stuff you have to get used to and what changes you might experience if you're an American like me, or maybe an international moving to the Netherlands. But living here, there's really a lot of benefits, and I realized that pretty quickly. Like, I moved here and I realized that this was the right decision for me. And right now, I feel like that has been confirmed. It is the right decision for me. I really like living here. And there are a couple of highlights that I wanted to share with you. These are my own personal highlights. For you, maybe they're not that important. For me, they're important. So the one I wanted to start with is safety. I think even though no place is completely safe, I have felt so much safer here in the Netherlands than I ever did in the US. And of course it varies by place, but just generally speaking, like, even if you look at the numbers, the statistics, you will see that in the Netherlands, just generally life here is much safer than in the US. And I've only heard ever since moving back here that it's gotten worse. But okay, let's leave that aside. My own personal experiences in those two countries is that I feel safer here in the Netherlands. I mean, in the US, like, after dark, it was very scary to walk back home on my own. So in these universities that I was at, they had these programs where you could like dial a number for safety, or that someone could walk you to another part of campus. If the campus was in the city itself like would have these walk with someone services. And like, that should just tell you, right? Like, in the Netherlands, you don't have this because it's not needed. There are children here who are out at night. And when I say children, I mean children, like 13, 14-year-old teenagers, you know, out and about town at whatever hour in the evening. Okay, it's maybe not 2 a.m., but they're out by themselves at like 9 p.m. or 10 p.m. and that's absolutely no problem. So sometimes when it's dark here, I'll be very cautious and then I'll just see a bunch of teenagers or a teenager on their bike, just whatever, you know, hanging out. And then I think, oh, right, I live in the Netherlands now. I don't have to be constantly vigilant. Like, of course, sometimes and to a certain degree, but it's not the same. So that is definitely one positive that I experienced since moving here. And the other is just how beautiful everything is. Now, I cannot tell you about this enough because I feel like every time I'm in a Dutch city, like I'm drawn to cities. To me, I think of like architectural beauty, like that's just what speaks to me, all right? So when I'm walking through Dutch cities and the cobblestone streets, these tiny alleyways, like I'm absolutely charmed. And to me, these little everyday pleasures, they really like improve my quality of life. Also, something that's very European is that you'll have, instead of one big department store, you have those too, but they're less common. And what you'll have is like these different shops to get different things. And that also means that you will see a lot of cute places like in Utrecht, for instance, you have all of these tiny, cute little bookshops everywhere scattered throughout the city. Same in Amsterdam. And I just love it. Like I spent so much time just perusing through these bookshops, and there'll be little stores like in Utrecht. There's even like a kitchenware store and it's adorable. Like it's on the main canal. It's just very cute, you know, and then you can get any kinds of things at these like specialized stores. In Amsterdam, there's a neighborhood, the Pipe, that's like famous for these kinds of cute shops, and you could really have a shop for anything here. Now, the other difference, which is also something that I like about living in the Netherlands, is that I feel like Dutch people have more hours in the day. Or at least that was my feeling when I first moved here, and I still sometimes feel that way. Because I think in America, like Americans, they spend their day working or not working. That's just how I imagine it, right? Like if when I lived there, I was either working or not working. That's just sort of the two categories that I had. And of course, that's not completely true. You do other things when you're not working and so on. But I felt like those were the two major chunks of the day. They're sleeping if you're lucky, but you know, that's how it goes. And then I moved to the Netherlands, and then I would hear the number of things Dutch people do within a day. So they would go to work, they had a coffee with someone, they went for a walk. In the evenings, they went to tennis, I don't know. And just like after that, they went for beers with their friends, and then they went home. So for me, like I just in the beginning had trouble understanding when they worked and when they didn't work, because the not work part seemed to encompass like at least a good chunk of the day. So I was always very confused about how they managed to do everything. And when you talk to Dutch people here, they'll talk about how they were traveling here, doing this, doing that. And I'm like, are you not tired? But they are not, my friends. They're just not. They just live their lives this way. So that was something I had to get used to. But I really like that about living here, because that has motivated me to do more things during my day and in my life. So I no longer have work and no work, which I definitely did before here. And I would see my friends all the time and so on. But I would say for me, in part because my friends were all in the same PhD with me or university. So we just saw each other all the time, kind of by default. But in the Netherlands, you have to make an effort, and it's kind of no problem. People just see each other all the time. They're on the go, and it's also easy. You know, they just effortlessly move from one thing to another. And I've started trying to do that as well, because I really see the value that brings. Okay, and now this final thing, stuff that I'm still getting used to, it just has to be said. The weather. Oh my God. I mean, before I moved to the Netherlands, I was a winter person. I liked the rain. I thought that was so romantic. And then I moved to the Netherlands, and then I enter a fall like this one. And it is the wettest fall since they started measuring the rain in the Netherlands. Like, oh my God. Also, I think it's the wettest year, not even the wettest fall. It's just been rain nonstop. So that is pretty depressing. But that said, because of all the positive things that I mentioned, you know, overall, I'm still pretty happy, like happier here. And usually when it rains, it does stop at some point in the day, but it is quite dark. And there are a limited number of hours during the daytime. So that is something that I will say that I'm getting used to. And there are ways to go about it. You can like go to cozy cafes, have some lights. You can make sure you take time off for yourself if you need that to, you know, recharge. So I'm definitely trying to do different things to get used to it. But I'm amazed, because now I feel like I cannot wait until the summer. Even though I tell myself there's a lot of good things that come with the winter, like the lights and everything. Like, I mean, I'm loving it, but whew, this is definitely a bit more of a challenge. Now, the other thing about living here as an international is that, you know, this is very hard for me to say and accept, but it's that my Dutch will never be as good as a Dutch person's. Now, maybe this is more relevant or important for me and my career path, I would say. Because I think in like my everyday situations, my Dutch is not a problem. Like, of course, there are a couple of words here and there that I don't get anymore, but other than that, it's fine. But oh my God, when it comes to my career path, because communication, English was always a big deal and very important, I think now I've just come to accept that my Dutch is just not going to be as good as people who are good at doing those things in Dutch. And I don't know if that's going to be a problem for me or not. Right now, it's been okay. Like, I've not experienced too many issues with it. My career path has continued as I had hoped. But you know, that's something I thought I would share because it is a concern, something that I think about from time to time. Like, hey, is this going to be holding me back? And at the same time, I think, you know, there are a lot of other things that I'm getting in return, so maybe it's okay. And finally, the final thing I wanted to say that I just don't get when living here is that all of these things that I've mentioned, that I've noticed, things that are, you know, bring me joy, that are interesting to me, that I think are so valuable about life here in the Netherlands, like most Dutch people don't seem to get that life here is so good. For them, this is just normal. And I think that continues to surprise me. I just don't understand. I mean, of course, when people see the news about wars and extreme things, people are definitely grateful about their lives. But I'm talking about just everyday things that even compared to countries that have it pretty good, here in the Netherlands, like things are actually quite exceptional. So no place is perfect, but the social safety net here and the value and emphasis placed on that is really very exceptional. And I think people here in the Netherlands, like Dutch people, need to see that and appreciate it because sometimes I think they just forget. So that was what I wanted to share with you today on my honest experiences of living in the Netherlands. As usual, if you feel like you have something to share, feel free to leave a comment down below. I love reading them, and thank you for watching. Until next time.